Hello, I'm Mara Purl, and this is Novel Conversations. Today I have three fantastic guests who are friends and authors who write in the romance and women's fiction genres. So we have RaeAnne Thayne, Jill Shalvis, and Tammy L. Grace. And thank you each so very much for being here with me. I thought I would start with the themes that each of you have identified for your writing, not just for one series, but for all your series. I should mention each of you has 8 series, something like that, and almost an unfathomable amount of work that you have accomplished. So, Jill, yours is Love, Laughter, and Happily Ever After, which I just think really does encapsulate your writing beautifully. And RaeAnne's stories of hope, healing, heart. I just love that. And Tammy, Unforgettable Characters, Perfect Escapes, Binge-worthy Stories. And for me, I have The Journey from Head to Heart. So we have some things in common in our themes. I thought I might ask, how did you arrive at these themes? And was this like right off the bat that you knew this was what you were writing, or did you kind of arrive at that point?
For me, with mine, I sort of knew what I was loving to write. And when I moved into writing single title from category romance, from the Silhouette Harlequin romances, I wanted to come up with a brand. And I realized the readers were responding the most to my stories about people healing and people going through hard times and coming out the other side. And so that was sort of the stories I realized I love to write, and it sort of worked well to encapsulate all of that into a little short, pithy
Yeah,
phrase.
it's great. I have not read all your series, but I have read 2 of them and enjoyed them tremendously. And I love that arc of,
Right.
of healing. There's that sense of there's hope and you're
Mm.
going to get there. It's not just that you're going to uh, push hope down the road and it'll be there someday, but it does arrive in the
Right.
story. And I think that encouragement is really lovely.
I really think my theme is actually found family. Um, all of my
Oh,
books are going to have a happy ever after, so that's why I'm branded that way. Um, I just have never enjoyed a story where the ending wasn't a good one. So I knew very early on I was going to write romance, and I knew from the beginning they would always have a happy ever after. Maybe not in the way the reader expects, but there would be a happy ever after. But the found family thing is important to me, and I find myself doing that over and over again. I just, a sense of community, a small town can bring that. An apartment building can bring that. It's the setting that you create, and then these people find each other, and they all needed what they find in different ways.
and may not have even known that they needed
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I've read your Lucky Harbor series and just loved it. It's
Oh,
really delightful, and I got that. I did get that theme.
and
Uh,
that was a perfect example. Like it starts out with three estranged sisters who don't know each other. They don't realize what they're missing, and what they're missing is family, and they get back together that way.
Beautiful. And Tammy, you have that in the Lavender Valley series,
Right.
a
Yeah.
found family.
Right. I was going to say I do a lot of found family as well. And when I'm asked about, a theme in a lot of my books, and a lot of it is hope. So I came up with the Unforgettable Characters and Perfect Escape line after I started writing. And I write mystery as well. So I wanted to have something that kind of encapsulated the different books that I write. But I do a lot of work with characters, and they're all pretty character driven. So that's something that readers enjoy, getting to know those characters that feel like
Especially
friends.
in romance. Especially in a romance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for me, the story arc, first of all, I come at this part of my career differently in that I was a performer. Then after I was on Days of Our Lives, I created my own soap opera, but it was for radio. So I'm from Los Angeles, and I was invited to this little coastal town for the summer to perform in a play. And so I was busy in the evenings, but by day I started exploring and I thought, ooh, this would make a great framework for a story. So I started to create a fictional town loosely based on the town where I was performing. And it grew from there. And then it became popular locally when I got it on the air. And then I got it onto 2 or 3 radio stations in the States. And then something amazing happened, which was I got a call from the BBC. And so my show became the first American radio serial that the BBC had ever broadcast. So
That's
there was a lot of jumping up and down, joy in LA. And then there was a lot of consternation, like, oh no, we're going to be up against the best radio dramas in the English language, we'll see. Well, I get a call from about 6 weeks after it started from our BBC producer, and she said, it's doing rather well. You might like to pop over. I said, what does rather well mean? She said 4.5 million listeners. So I went to London, did a press tour. And then my fictional town is called Milford Haven. And it's loosely based on a California town called Cambria. So when I was doing research, Cambria is a Welsh name. So looking at the map of Wales, there was an original town called Milford Haven. Well, inadvertently, my radio show was helping them with tourism. So they invited me to this little town of Milford Haven. Astonishing experience because they gave me a parade and a reception in town hall. Fortunately, I'd had a tray engraved that said from Milford Haven to Milford Haven. So I had something to give them. Anyway, so apparently I have my own town in Wales. It's just been, amazing. So that's what led eventually to books. So most of the time you have books which then get adapted for media and end up as a television show, for example. But I sort of went backwards. Started with media and now I'm writing books. And I will never catch up to any of you, but I am so enjoying the journey. It's such a discovery. I feel it's a conversation with my readers, most of whom are women. And it also is you learn how you think. So I have a character who's an artist, and she comes from a lovely family, but there's kind of no room for her because they don't get what it means to be an artist. And so in the prequel to my series, that's when she breaks away and finds her way to Milford Haven and starts her real life. And indeed, it really is found family. So it's an iconic story that we are participating in, I think. So what kind of previous experiences ended up preparing you to be a novelist?
I was never intending to be a novelist. I was in journalism, so was RaeAnne actually, and I was going to do nonfiction. I just couldn't. The stories, I kept embellishing the stories, and you can't do that. It's frowned upon. Nonfiction. Right. So I finally figured out I was supposed to write makeup stuff, which I have been doing all my life. So that was a very natural transition.
So what kind of journalism were you doing?
I was doing, this is back in the Ice Age. So like for newspaper, I was doing it, stories for newspaper, the local newspaper. And it just killed me. It was so dry and so boring. And I was very young and just, it was not a fit, but I couldn't stop writing, luckily. So that's where that.
Do you feel that you got some good experience under your belt doing that?
Well, I've been making up stories since I could talk. So I've been telling stories for a very long time before I could hold a pencil. And so that I've learned a lot in journalism. Mostly I learned what I don't want to do and what wasn't a fit for me. But that was very helpful to figure out what you don't want.
Yeah, I get that. Right. And RaeAnne, you were a journalist.
I was. So I actually knew from the time I was probably 16, 17 that I wanted to write romance novels. So, but I didn't know. I learned how to tell stories working for my high school newspaper. I loved that experience, but I didn't know anything about writing fiction. And so I thought, well, I'll just go into journalism. We'll see what happens there. And so I ended up getting a degree in journalism, working for 10 years in newspapers, daily newspapers. I was the news editor for the last I think 7 years I was there of a small daily newspaper. So I had to read all the wire stories, which was a great place for ideas. When you have to read every single news story
Yes.
that's out there, you get idea after idea. But that whole time I wanted to write a book. I used to talk about it with my friends. I talked about it with the newspaper staff, and I thought someday I'm going to do this. And I was on maternity leave with our daughter, who's will be 35 this summer, and decided, okay, now's the time. I've got a couple months off. I can maybe while she sleeps, I might be able to get something done. And so that was when I started, and it was awful. And I kept trying and kept trying. And I'm sure Jill and Tammy and you can probably relate that your first attempts aren't necessarily what you want people to remember you for.
Oh my goodness. I mean, as soon as I ever find any of those early books, I take them right to the shredder.
Right. Yep.
RaeAnne and I have known each other since our first book.
Yep. We
We're
wrote for the
so
very
great.
same first publisher was together. We were there together.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
that is so, those long friendships are so precious. Oh, that's beautiful.
And we didn't know we
So,
were crap at the time.
And I look back at the books that I wrote that actually were published. And they're not, I still enjoy looking at them and thinking how far I've come, but still there was definitely something there from the beginning that I could see, what had led me to that point to writing that at that time in my life and all those things. And I don't think they're terrible. They're not what I'm writing right now, but I
yeah.
don't think they're terrible books.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us would say, part of me wants to go back and to book one of my series, and I could do such a great rewrite now. But it's really more important to continue,
Right.
go forward, and I'm evolving, and my characters are evolving, and I think that's part of the fun. I also have a secret journalist past. Uh, I grew up in Tokyo. There was an English language paper there. And I went into Mr. Shibata's office when I was a teenager and asked for a job. And he just started laughing. And by then I was already twice his height. And so I just stood there until he stopped laughing. And he said, okay, Mara, well, what is it that you think you want to write? So I said, there are artists who come to visit Japan and I'd like to interview them. So he gave me a shot and he said, okay, there's a press conference this afternoon. You go there and then you come back and write it up, yes, sir. So I did that. And then he said, well, this is very nice, but this is an essay. This isn't journalism. Here's what you do in journalism. So I had this mentor. So that was really neat. I wrote for that paper while I was in school. And then I later had a job with the Financial Times of London in the New York bureau. I asked them why. I said, I don't know anything about finance. Why would you want to hire me? And they said, we can teach you the finance stuff, but we just need a good writer. So that was an incredible experience. Very, very steep learning arc, but I did learn a lot and worked with wonderful colleagues. And then I did freelance for a while on my way to coming back to my core, which is exactly like what you said, Joe, which is a storyteller. So I knew I had to get back to that. I couldn't stay in that factual place, but I treasure it. And I think journalism is really important and really under attack these days. So
Absolutely agree. And I would say it's a great training ground for fiction writers as well. You learn that everybody has a story I loved interviewing people because you find out so many fascinating things about them. And, you learn how to write fast and how to write on a
on
deadline and how to, keep the words in the order they're supposed to be in. Yeah, many,
yeah,
many things you learn as a
right.
journalist that can help you in your career as a novelist.
I totally agree.
I had a very small journalism role. When I was in middle school, was introduced to creative writing by our English teacher. And I think that was the first time that I really had a lot of fun and got to write, creatively. And I just loved it. And so he got me a gig with the local paper. And I had my own little column that was based on the school life, that I wrote each year for about 3 years. And I really enjoyed it. But then I don't know why. I never thought about doing it like for a career. So I spent most of my career in government, which is when I decided I needed to write mysteries about killing people. And then when I retired, I decided I really wanted to be a novelist. I always loved to read, got kicked out of the library all the time because I was in there too much. But that's how I started. When I finally retired, I thought I'm going to give this second career a shot, and started with women's fiction, but then merged and wrote murder mysteries too.
Well, all of us took advantage of that proving ground and learned from it. Let me ask, how do you see the function of plot? You know, the pace, the structure, the lead in, the positioning of the climax of the story. And do you think it's important to deliver a surprise somewhere along the line? And I kind of already know that all of us are maybe more plotters than pantsers because RaeAnne and Jill, you do a trip with another writer friend where you work on plotting together. That's just fascinating to me.
It's been a
Um,
really great thing. We actually have there's a group of four of us, and we get together once a year. And a beach house. We rent a beach house, and we
oh, I
all
love
live in cold places, and so it's nice to get away somewhere not cold. And then we just help each other plot books, and it's a really magical experience. Would you agree, Jill?
Completely. I mean, I think my soul is a cliff, jump off the cliff and go write the book, but I always get lost that way. So I've become in the last decade, maybe more, a serious plotter. And RaeAnne and Michelle and Molly, whoever's with us, there's four of us. It's really a lot of work to do, but it's invaluable to catch things that you wouldn't have gotten by yourself. We go down to turning points and resolution, a conflict, we do it all, goals, fears, all that. And it's invaluable to the story so that you're not trying to do it off the cuff, that you have a roadmap. I don't think I could do it without that anymore.
We come up with the ideas ourselves, we come up with the characters. And really, to your question, I believe that the characters are the most important part of the stories, but the plot helps your characters achieve the arc that they need to go from where they start to where they need to end up. And so we work on that with each other. And the advantage of a plot group, to my mind, is that we all have different life experiences. We all watch different television shows. We all read different kinds of books. Everybody has something different. And when you've written as many books as Jill and I have, she's written probably twice as many as I have, but I'm in the 80 almost, and she's like 130, something
No,
like
110 maybe, I don't know. But yeah, a lot. And it's
a lot. It's hard to be creative and hard to do something different that you haven't done before. And so it really does help to have somebody say, "Hey, what if you did this with your characters?" And it's something I never would have come up with from my own life experience. So it's really, really helpful.
incredibly helpful.
brilliant. It's a really lovely idea. I love that you do that. There's a book that I love called The Art of Writing for Theater by an author named Lajos Egri. And I think this book came out in the 1940s. And there are many other books that reference that kind of writing, but frankly, they all go back to his primary points. And what he says about character is that if you really know your characters and you can kind of give them room, they'll write their story.
Mhm.
Wish that was true.
Yes.
But I mean, I know I listen to my characters and I can't help it. I hear what they're saying. I gotta write it down. I had a friend who used to say, "Good night, everybody," because you knew I had all these people running around in my head. Um, but so would you say, is that what you mean by character driven?
Right. Yes, absolutely. I think that especially the women's fiction books tend to be character driven because, you don't have people shooting at them, people, car chases, all of those things. So it really has to be about these these people and their journey to going from, again, where they start and where they need to end up, so that their heart is open to other experiences, or they're able to heal relationships with people that they may have been struggling with, all the things that we deal with as women. It is about seeing them sort of reach their full potential, to my mind. And it's the plot that pushes that forward and allows them to have those experiences that lead them to that place.
The conflict for me has always been the hardest part between the characters, and the plot really helps drive that if you're careful, if you think about it ahead of time. You need an internal conflict, which, as RaeAnne said, in contemporary, it can be really difficult. You don't have a zombie apocalypse. You aren't being chased with a guy with a gun. So it's got to be some sort of internal fear. And then that the plot can drive. So if you do it right, which I never do the first time, I never do it right the first time, you get all these threads and you can braid them together. And it turns out that character, to me, and possibly to anybody who's writing contemporary romance, is almost more important than the plot, but you need the plot.
Do you think there's an inherent difference in the structure of romance versus women's fiction?
Well, I think in women's fiction, romance is just one of the threads in a couple of storylines you have going. So that makes it even more complicated to plot. And RaeAnne and I have written stories like that many times, where we have, a session for the romance. We have a session for maybe the sister's relationship. We have a session for whatever the plot is. And you have to figure out what those turning points are in each one of those lines and seamlessly braid it all together.
Yes, the braiding.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm adapting 100 episodes of an existing radio show. And so it wasn't going to be 100 books. So what was it going to be, and how was I going to divide things up? So it's a similar process to what you're talking about.
I have a series that's optioned, and watching the head showrunner write, take 3 of my books. It's a Cedar Ridge series, where 3 books. And, each one has a story for the brother. Each brother has its own story, but the showrunner isn't going to write it like that. He takes
No.
all 3 stories and he's writing all 3 consecutively. And it's fascinating,
Yeah,
but work.
it is different. And I'm sort of stuck with cliffhangers.
Mhm.
And I know that one of your promises to your readers is no cliffhangers. So I try to warn people, you're not going to find out everything in book 1. It is all 10 of these characters. You're going to find out the last piece of the puzzle will go into place in book 5. It's a pentalogy. And by the way, book 5 is the one that I have to finish for this year. So there's a lot of pressure, but it's a lot of fun. And many things have now concluded. But I'm kind of asking people from the outset to read 5 books. Do you see your books as an escape from regular life or as a deeper dive into regular life?
I mean, I think romance novels are an escape by the very nature. So to me, it's brain candy. It's not brain surgery, but equally important in some ways, equally important. To me, they're a true escape, but that's just me, and everyone has their own opinion on that.
Tammy, you talk about your books as being escape.
Right. I think I've always read to escape. So I think that's what I like about creating books that like take you to another place where you can escape your everyday worries, perhaps, or your everyday life, or whatever it is, and just totally immerse yourself into another world, which I like when I'm reading. So I think I tend to write what I like to read,
Mhm.
that tends to happen to me. But I would say mine are an escape, but they have themes in them. A lot of the women that I've written are dealing with some pretty heavy things. They've lost children, or they're going through a divorce, or they're going through something even worse. And so there is, part of it is real, very realistic and can be somewhat tragic. But I still think it's an escape. And when readers talk to me about what they enjoy, they like feeling like they are there and that these people are real. So I think that speaks to an escape.
I would agree that, I have people that say my books are comfort reads, and I'm totally fine with that. I have no problem if people can read my books and find comfort from a world that is scary and chaotic and confusing in many ways. And I find, I read books for escape, but through that process, I learn things too. And I can remember a comment from a reader quite early in my career when I was asking, what do you read? Why do you like the books that you read, and what do you get out of them? And somebody said that they read romance because, they can see through the trouble that the characters are having. They solve their problem. Maybe I can solve my problem too. And I
Yeah.
really think that that's kind of a universal thing, that we need that hope that we find in books. We need that idea that there can be happy endings, even if we're in the middle of what's not a very happy ending at this particular point in our life. We need that hope that things will get better at some point.
Perhaps now more than ever.
Right.
Yeah. All of us write series, and but you also have written some standalones. Do you have a preference?
A series. My personal reading preference as a reader is a series. I do both because my readers are divided. Some like series connected books, some like standalones, and I'm trying to please everyone. So the Sunrise Cove, my latest series, there's 8 books, and they're all just standalones. They're only connected by setting, which is Lake Tahoe. But then the series I'm writing right now is 3 connected books that will come out. And so I just try to say on my website whether it's connected or not, and the readers can make their choice. But my personal choice is always a connected series.
I would agree. I like, as a reader, I love connected series, and would just love to binge, on a whole big set of connected series. And I like the interwoven lives that you can create in a connected series.
Definitely.
I write a lot of women's friendship type books, and I just think there's a lot of power in writing those and seeing, how people help other people through sometimes very difficult events in their lives, and then they come out, changed and better, and like RaeAnne's talking about, hopeful, which I think is easier to do to me in a connected series than just, a standalone book.
And it's fun not to let go of those characters
I
too.
know. I have a hard time saying goodbye. And so, I thought I was done with the series, and then, readers will say, "Oh, I really, really, really like those." And so then, you'll have another idea and you think, "Okay, I'll write more." So yeah, I think it's my reader preference again, because I tend to really like a connected series.
I'll add my voice to that, the same thing. I absolutely love to write series. I love, again, I have a hard time saying goodbye to my characters, so I love when they can come back in a future book, and you can see that everything's still going great with those people, and so but I have also, like Jill, have written books that are connected only by location. And readers do enjoy those, but I think they do want characters to pop in and out. The downside of a series is that there are many readers who will not even start a series until it's all done,
Mhm.
because they don't want to be left hanging. They don't, and I think that's really increased in the age of ebooks, where they want everything right now. Readers just, they don't want to wait for a year or half a year or however long it's going to take to finish a book, and
You're
so
so right. Yeah.
they're not going to finish. They're not even going to start until the series is over.
I've
Instant
had I've had readers say that to me. It's like, notify me when they're all done. Not going to start till then. So
Well, that's why I have a series, and RaeAnne, you do too, where you don't have to read the whole series. Although a lot of times readers won't believe me. I swear to you that the Sunrise Book is
Yeah.
standalone. I swear to you. But yeah,
the braiding and the connected aspect of our stories, I really admire how each of you does, I think, a really beautiful job. It's kind of crocheted. It's like there's this unit in this book is complete, but those threads are connected to another complete set. And that's really how life is. And I love the perspective that we get from a friend who can see what we can't see about ourselves, our lives. And that's also, I think, part of what we're offering, in this story. I love my protagonist is Miranda. She's a painter, and she has a sister who's a businesswoman, and they just couldn't be more different. And so there's a conversation that they have where they realize the extent to which they do not understand each other's work. And so there's a breakthrough in that moment. And that was fun for me to write. I have a very close friend who's like a hedge fund person, and I wouldn't begin to be able to do her career. but neither could she do mine, and so that's just so neat to sort of bring that into a story.
I was going to add one more thing, Mara. One thing that I started doing was bringing, which I know other authors do too, bringing characters from one series, sprinkle them into another series, and readers just love that. They love seeing an old friend, as they say, that pops in to visit in another series, and I like doing that too. It's kind of fun to bring them back and forth. So I think that's another fun aspect of a series.
And that reminded me of something I wanted to mention to you, RaeAnne. In one of your stories, you have a character who suddenly won't do her book tour, And this just happened to Michael Connolly. I don't know if you read
Yeah.
him or know anything about him, but he's a wonderful mystery writer here in LA. And he had to cancel his book tour. And I just thought, I understand all about that because of RaeAnne. It was really cool.
It does happen.
Yeah, it does. And to your point, Tammy, Connolly has a character who has now walked into a second series.
Right.
And it is fun. It kind of makes you want to like reread both, which is good for us authors. We all live in interesting places. I love seeing the posts from Utah, RaeAnne, and my husband and I have a home in Colorado. And so, I can relate sometimes to the mountains and to the weather and stuff. And then I love your posts, Jill, from Tahoe. And I'm a Californian, and although I'm in Southern California, which is almost a different state,
Really?
but I love Northern California too, and the Sierras, and and Tammy, the Oregon coast, and so all of us are making our settings almost characters in our series. Would you agree with that, or
Definitely.
have a feeling about why you live where you do, or the extent to which you bring your own life settings into your work?
I live in Nevada, just outside of the Reno Tahoe area. But I've set most of my books in the Pacific Northwest and spent a lot of time there visiting family. And so that's where I came up with my first idea for a women's fiction novel, was on a ferry to the San Juan Islands. And so I just thought, oh, it's such a perfect escape place, and it just kind of spoke to me. So that's, a reason that I chose that area. I like writing where I'm more familiar with an area. I think it's more difficult to write somewhere where you've never, ever, ever seen.
Well, it
But
just takes a lot of
a lot
research.
of, a lot of research, yeah. So that's my reasoning. I tend to write more small town. I'm more of a small town person living in a small rural area. So again, it's kind of more what if I had to write a big city novel, I'd probably be lost. And I'm just more comfortable in that zone, I think, of a small town. Plus it fits the style of what I write, I think, more.
I think it does help to write about areas that you know. I live in northern Utah, spend a lot of time in southern Utah. I've never set a book in either of those places but I've set it in Idaho. I have lots of books in Idaho. I have lots
Yeah,
of books in Colorado, in the West. And
Mhm.
then I write on the Pacific Northwest as well, Oregon coast, because it's places that I love. And if people, I have readers sometimes ask me, why don't you ever set a book in like Omaha or something like that? And well, I don't have much experience, although I did grow up in Indiana. It's been many a year since I've lived there. And so, but I can look out my window and see the mountains, and or I can walk through the mountains and smell the smells. And it's not very much different, in northern Utah as it is from Idaho. And so those things I can incorporate that sort of richer tapestry of um, sensations in my books from places that I've been to. Whereas, if I haven't been somewhere, even if I can research it on the internet, it's not quite the same as
not
being.
the same. Yeah. I think I've shared this before with Tammy, but I was speaking one year at the Ventura Book Festival, and Andrew Clavin was going to be there, and he's a thriller writer. And I asked if he would like to debate men's fiction versus women's fiction. And he said He said, Mara, there's no such thing as men's fiction. I said, there is if there's women's fiction. And so he's like, okay. And we had this fascinating conversation. It's not like it's two buckets, but it's a kind of continuum. And we started identifying certain things. So in men's fiction, there was velocity. In women's fiction, there was kind of a lingering over details, and a lot of other distinctions, that we made. But I find in women's fiction, we are pretty careful to stimulate all five senses. So you get the look of a place, the sound of a place, the aroma of a place, the touch, all of that, which really brings you vividly into the story, which is it's what I like to read. I mean, sometimes I'm in the mood for a fast paced, but Dan Brown racing around Rome is exciting. But then something happened when I was reading one of his books where something was placed in the pocket of a jacket, and then the jacket was never mentioned again. Well, I can't even go on with the story because I got to know where's the jacket and where's the thing in the pocket of the jacket. So that sense of
That's
detail.
my worst nightmare because I know I throw things out there that I never remember again.
Yeah, keeping track of all those things. I don't know about you. I have like a show Bible, that has like the color of the car that each person drives and all that stuff, because if I don't, there's going to be a reader who says, excuse me, Samantha's car was green last time. What happened?
You better believe they'll find those mistakes.
They will. Yes. Yes. Our readers count on us for certain things. What do you think your readers count on you for?
I mean, I would say for me, it would be characters in Happy Ever After. A feel good, like they're looking for a mac and cheese read, a cinnamon toast on a cold night read. And I think that's what I deliver.
And lots of laughs with your books.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Laugh out loud.
In my opinion, in my writing, people always say, why are the backgrounds so dark? I have to make them dark to balance the humor. Otherwise, it's just silly, But I find by giving these people real problems and real tragedies or in their backstory, that we can find the humor in the everyday little things easier.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's like a painting or a good photograph, that you have certain things in relief and can see them more clearly.
I actually think of my characters as a painting. They start out, as a blank sheet, and then you do a stick figure, and then you add the hands, and you add the hair, and you add the eyes, and then you maybe color it in, and then you paint it, and then it's like a build. Each draft is a building onto that painting.
RaeAnne?
I think readers come to mine again for comfort. I think they know that there's going to be a happy ending at some point. They're going to feel good and cozy and warm as they're reading my books, and that's exactly what I hope to deliver. I hope that they come through and see again that my characters have been through tough things and they can handle the tough things in their life as well, as they see my characters sort of deal with their struggles.
I would echo that. I think the feel good factor. I include dogs in all my books, so I have a lot of dog lovers that enjoy, that companionship of a dog. So although like we've all said, they face some tragedies in their lives. In the end, they end on hope. So I think they're looking for hope.
I think a romance reader in general is looking for hope and escape, like we've talked about.
One of the extraordinary things about both romance and women's fiction is intimacy. And I mean, it means different things. There's the fact that it's just one reader is experiencing one book at a time, and that in itself is an intimate experience. And then what we're writing about are quite often really intimate matters, whether they're psychological, physical, having to do with relationship or having to do with self. So what does intimacy mean to you?
I don't think intimacy has to be physical, for one thing. Although it often is in my books, it doesn't have to be. I think intimacy is in that first moment when they bare their souls, or when they let go of a secret that they were holding on to, thinking they couldn't be loved because of it, and then they share it and they realize that you can still be loved because of that. That's intimacy to me.
Yes.
I would agree, and I think it's about being willing to be vulnerable, and I think that that's something all of our characters need to show to the other people that in their lives that they're willing to, as Jill said, bare their souls, bear something difficult that happened to them, be honest and real with each other, and I think that's definitely a form of intimacy. And you're right, it's a very intimate thing as a reader, I find the reading experience very intimate. I'm deep in these characters, deep in this author's mindset. And so I do try to, as an author, try to give that to my readers as well, to let them, again, feel good at the end of the book, feel like, the world is maybe a little bit brighter than it was when they started reading the book and feel a little bit better about the way things are going in their world.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you first said that, Mara, the first word that popped into my mind was like trust or connection.
Mhm.
So to me, it's most of the women that they're in this series um, are on their own through various circumstances. So a lot of them are not trusting right off the bat, and then they find, a connection through friendship, maybe romance, maybe something else, but just that ability to trust someone else or let someone else in, maybe to help them or to share their story.
Did you have to um, make a decision, I guess, you with your publishers about the degree of heat that you will represent in your series?
I don't think I've ever had a conversation like that with my editor. I mean, I've had great editors that are just like, please write the story you want to write. And so I do. I mean, I would say mine are definitely rated R, but we've never discussed the level of heat.
I ask because it was sort of an unusual experience that I had a few years ago on a panel. Everyone else was a romance writer. And what I write is women's fiction, which, as we've already distinguished, is a little bit different. And they asked me how hot my story was. And I said, well, it depends on the storyline. If it's Samantha, she's somebody who just lives all in her head. She's a PhD. That's not much part of her life. But if you're talking about Cynthia, she's a pretty hot babe. And they were like, no, no, no. How hot is the book? And I realized we were coming from kind of different paradigms. And they explained that their book covers were actually coded such that if there was a lot of red on the cover, there was a lot of heat in the writing, and if there's a lot of powder blue, and I showed one of my book covers and it's blue and red. So it's like, okay, I guess I'm coding my book, covers correctly. But it's interesting, right? Again, to trustworthiness so that people are comfortable with whatever choice they make as a reader. My goal for my characters just is authenticity. I can't have a character get to this point of being, you know, wildly in love with someone, and finally it's clear that this is how they both feel, and it's going to be a relationship. Then something is likely to happen physically, and hopefully it's just appropriate. It's authentic, and not. Um, but that doesn't mean that's correct for every series or every author.
Yeah, I would say mine fall into the very low heat category. I don't do a lot of physical sex scenes or anything like that. So mine are, and again, my readership tends to skew that way. They like reading more about the connections and the family and the friendship, and there is a little bit of romance in them, but you could take the romance out of the book and still have a story. So it's not a romance story where
So
there's an expectation of that each time.
yeah, what's great is that we have all found our readers. I just, I'm always interested in the process of how do we find them or how do they find us, you know?
I would say mine are more on the mild end of the scale as well. But I will say when I first started writing, they weren't, and it was kind of an evolution for me. And I don't say evolution in terms of I ended up in a better place than where I was. Just my own style as I was writing. I didn't enjoy writing the love scenes. I didn't feel like I did them well, And I was getting more response from readers about the emotional journey that the characters were taking than anything about, that this was a really sexy book and I love that part. And so for me, it was just sort of again, a natural evolution where I just realized I want to focus more on the emotional journey. I'm not saying they never get together. I'm not saying, that that's not a natural, normal part of life. It's just for my particular writing style and the cozier kind of books that I want to write. I didn't feel the necessity to bring that into the stories that I was writing. That's not to say I will never go back and write, sexy love scenes because I can see that in certain situations and certain characters. But for me at this particular point in my career, and I've never really had that conversation other than I had the same editor for 75 books, I should say. So she knew from the get-go, what I wrote and she was totally great with it. A few times I've written books that are part of when I was writing for Harlequin. Their category romance, their continuities where Harlequin comes up with the idea and they give the authors like six different authors a different idea as part of this series. Then you write your own book. And I wrote one that wasn't sexy, and the editor of that was a different editor than mine, and she said, you need to put some sex in this. And I said, no, I don't. And so, I kind of pushed back a little, and my editor, of course, who it was wonderful with me, supported me and backed me up and said, no, it's not necessary. That's the only conversation I've ever had really with my publisher about what I write and how I write it.
Yeah, I'm fortunate also to have a superb editor. Life wouldn't be the life that I know without her. She's just, fantastic. So to have a trusted colleague like that is so valuable. So do you see the work that we're doing as being competitive or synergistic?
I think that's a good question. I think I'm of the belief that the more romance readers that we can bring in, or the more women's fiction readers we can bring in, it's going to benefit everyone because they're voracious readers and they constantly want a story. And so your goal, I mean, my goal as a writer is just to give them a good story that at the end of the time they'll want to share it with their friends. And then if somebody else gives them a good story, I'm not upset about that. I think it's great. I agree with the concept that the rising tide raises all ships, and so we're all kind of have the same goal. And not to say that, there's not some level of competition at some points where you think, well, that person is really doing well. What can I do to hit that market that they're hitting and bring sort of more to my books, maybe that they're delivering that I'm maybe not delivering at this point in my career.
I mean, I'd like to think there's room for all of us wherever we want to be in our career, at the top, in the middle. There's some comfort in that, actually, for me, thinking that anybody can make it at any certain time. But I do try to read what's out there, and things change, and nothing has changed as much as this world that we're in, and publishing has changed so vastly. So I just like to keep on up with what everyone else is writing. But for me and my own personal anxiety, I cannot try to write to a trend. I still have to write from my heart on what I think is working for me. But I honestly believe there is room for all of us to do well.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a lot of, you use the word synergy. I just think collaborating with other authors is a very fun thing to do. I think meeting other authors and sharing each other's work only benefits all of them. It's not, I've never met a reader who only reads one author. They read a ton of books, and like RaeAnne said, most of the people that are in our genres, they just devour them. Like so, unless you can write a book a day for them, they're going to read other people.
Yeah.
And I get asked all the time, like, what other authors can I read?
Uh-huh. I do
And
too.
Yeah, I do the same. And when I'm signing a book and I'm in that space of feeling such great relief that this book is finished and exists. And of course, what's the first question that comes from the readers is, when's the next one coming out? And so at that point, I love to point my readers to other authors who I truly think they will enjoy. And so, like over the past few years, I have done posts that include a book of mine and a book of yours, RaeAnne, or a book of mine or a book of yours, Jill, and you too, Tammy, and just say, while you're waiting for my next one, don't stop reading. You're going to love this author too.
If you let us know if you were to let me know when you're doing that, I'd amplify for you on my socials. So please let me know.
Okay.
Happy to do that anytime.
Thank you so much. I will. I will.
That's the benefit of having writer friends. You can share, and that's how
Right.
it gets out.
Right. Exactly. What is the most difficult thing you would say about being an author?
I think marketing is the most difficult.
I was going to say it's a better question to ask what's the easier, because to me, writing is hard. All of it's hard, especially marketing, especially publicity. I mean, I came from a time where that wasn't really a thing, and now we're having to put ourselves out there and market, and that's not my expertise. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I again, from the heart, I like to write from the heart. I like to market from the heart, for that matter. And so that's what I mean when I say, I love your books. I want to send, my readers to you. I mean, sometimes when I start a new book, I will admit, I sit there for a moment and I think, what in the world makes me think I can write a book? And then, I have some framed, book covers around, and I'll look at them and I'll go, oh, well, I have done it before. I guess that means I can do it. So there is that kind of angst. And there is the relentlessness of a deadline. But on the other hand, I can't imagine not writing. It's how I process everything, in life.
The hardest part for me is that I want to deliver the same experience to my readers with a totally different story. And it's hard to do that again and
Oh,
again when you've
interesting.
done 80 books, 80, it's hard to be creative. And it does feel like every single book is a little bit harder than the one before because I want to dig a little bit deeper, and we picked all the low-hanging fruit early in our careers with ideas that we might have had. So we have to push a lot harder once you get to a certain stage in your career to still give a book that's not going to read the same as a book that I wrote 10 years ago. It's going to be a totally different book, but give readers that same experience that they're looking for, that they know that they can find in a RaeAnne Thayne book.
Well, you're doing it.
Yeah,
You're
definitely.
I
doing
don't know about that. As Jill knows, I'm very angsty. We angst to each other every day, just about every day.
Every day. And I always have this imposter syndrome, always, every time, every day. I cry my way through a rough draft. And then I cry in relief that the rough draft is done. And then, as you're writing draft 2 and 3 and 4, and sometimes 5 and 6, all of it's hard, but I'm uniquely suited to do nothing else. Like, I don't know what else I would do. I have all these stories to tell. So, you suck it up and you keep going.
You keep going. I know. I figure I got to live to about 120 to get through my list of what I want to publish and write. Uh,
I think the other struggle I have right now is the struggle to stay relevant in an age when everything is changing in publishing. And I don't write really sexy books. It's hard for me to get traction on TikTok because I don't write sexy books. And they're not, necessarily aimed for younger readers, although I think younger readers would still enjoy them. And so it's trying to stay out there and to have still find new readers while still making my older readers feel happy with the books that I've written.
Thank you, each of you, so much for a really enlightening, fun, delightful conversation. I hope we can do it again sometime. I dare to hope we could be in person sometime. So all the very best to each of you with their marvelous writing. And thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. It was a
Thank you very
delight.
much.